Shadows of the Heidelberg Laboratory. On the outskirts of the small German town of Heidelberg, surrounded by dense forests, stood a building that the locals preferred not to talk about. Gray, with broken windows and shabby walls, it stood like a monument to forgotten secrets. It was called Bohr's Laboratory, after its founder, Dr. Klaus Bohr, a famous biochemist of the mid-20th century. Local legend said that during World War II, cruel experiments on people were conducted within the walls of the laboratory. Prisoners deemed unworthy were turned into guinea pigs to create biological weapons. After the war, Dr. Bohr disappeared, as did most of his staff, and the building was abandoned. However, there were rumors that strange noises could still be heard inside. Whispering, banging, crying. Some claimed to have seen lights in the windows, although the electricity had long since been cut off. In 2023, a group of American students from the University of Chicago decided to travel to Germany as part of the Abandoned Places of Europe project. They included Lauren, an ambitious journalist, her friend Rick, a videographer with a passion for making horror movies, and Daniel and Sarah, amateur archaeologists. When they heard about Bohr's lab, they couldn't resist the opportunity to explore it and record material for the blog. "It's going to go viral," Lauren said confidently as she gathered her equipment. "We'll show the world the truth about these places." When locals heard about their plans, they urged them to back out. "Leave this place alone," said an old woman in a local cafe. "It's haunted by the ghosts of the past." But the students only laughed. That cold January evening, the group approached the lab. The moon illuminated the broken road leading to the building. There was an eerie silence all around, broken only by the rustle of the wind in the dead trees. "Can you feel it?" Sarah whispered, stopping at the threshold. "There's something wrong here." Lauren ignored her words and stepped inside. The old hallway greeted them with the smell of mold and decay. The wallpaper, once snow-white, had turned to a gray mass, dark stains covering the walls. "Rick, turn on the camera," Lauren ordered. "I'm recording it now." Their footsteps echoed through the corridors. Soon they came to the first door, behind which they found an empty lab. Tables, test tubes, antique microscopes. It looked as if they had been working here yesterday. "Look," Daniel pointed to an old journal. On its cover it said, "Apollo Program, Tissue Regeneration." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, looking at the yellowed pages. On the last page was a blood-stained inscription. "You can't bring them back, but they will come back for you." They continued to explore the building, finding more and more strange objects. Glass containers of murky liquid, mutilated photographs of people, diagrams of the human body circled with red lines. "I don't want to stay here," Sarah said quietly. "This place breathes." Her words were confirmed when there was a thud somewhere up ahead. "Who's there?" Rick shouted, shining his flashlight down the hallway. The answer was silence. "Probably rats," Lauren suggested, but they soon realized they were wrong. On the lower level of the building, hidden under a layer of earth, they found a massive metal door. The rusty locks had been torn off, and it yielded easily to their efforts. The room behind the door appeared huge, lit by a faint blue light. Along the walls were capsules containing bodies. Each was covered in strange growths, as if the skin had fused with something unnatural. "Are they human?" Daniel exhaled. One of the capsules suddenly lit up. A loud squeak filled the room, and the liquid inside began to bubble. "Turn it off," Lauren shouted, but it was too late. The creature in the capsule opened its eyes. The creature in the capsule let out a low growl that resembled both a groan and a metallic scraping sound. Its eyes, glittering like glass balls, turned toward the group. "This is impossible. It's alive." Daniel backed away, dropping the flashlight. The capsule cracked, and a viscous liquid gushed onto the floor. A creature that looked both human and animal, with rotting skin and elongated limbs, crawled out. Its movements were convulsive but quick, like a predator just out of its cage. Rick rushed toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own with a deafening rumble. "We're trapped," Sarah shouted, trying to open it. The creature let out a wild shriek and lunged at them. Lauren barely dodged it in time, grabbing a metal bar from the floor and slamming it into its back. The sound was deafening, as if she had struck a rock. "It's invulnerable," she shouted. But before the creature could strike, something unexpected happened. Mechanical arms began to emerge from the walls, as if part of the old security system had come to life. They grabbed the creature and pulled it back into the capsule. The group stood in utter shock, breathing heavily. "This place isn't just a lab," Sarah muttered. "It's alive." In one of the rooms, they found an old cabinet that held a journal that had belonged to Dr. Burr. Lauren began to read aloud. Project Apollo was about creating a new human being capable of surviving any condition. "We took humans, fused their tissues with mechanical elements, implanted artificial organs. But we went too far. They've become monsters. They no longer obey us. They are waiting for their time." The text was further interrupted by bloodstains. So it wasn't just experiments. They wanted to create a biological weapon. Daniel wrapped his arms around his head. "But something went wrong. The question is why it's still working," Rick added. "And who turned it on?" Sarah whispered, pointing at the camera that was slowly turning in their direction. "The chase." They decided to run from the building, but the hallways began to change. The walls seemed to move, as if drawing them deeper and deeper. The light of flashlights flickered and footsteps echoed through the empty halls. "The stairs were here," Rick shouted. "We couldn't have gotten this far. The building." "It's changing," Lauren replied, looking around in horror. There was a loud scraping sound from behind them. When they turned around, creatures similar to what they had seen in the pod began to emerge from the darkness. But now there were more of them, 6 or 7, and they were moving in synchronization like a pack of predators. "Run!" Daniel shouted. They rushed down the hallway, but one of the monsters jumped on Rick. His screams filled the building, but no one could stop. He was dead. Sarah tried to turn around, but Lauren forcefully dragged her by the arm. "There's nothing we can do." As they ran, they came upon a hatch in the floor, hidden under a layer of dust. Daniel opened it with difficulty, and they went down a narrow staircase, ending up in another underground level. This part of the lab was in better condition than the rest. Soft lights burned here, and pictures of a smiling Dr. Burr hung on the walls. "This is weird." Sarah touched one of the photos. It looked new. Suddenly, a mechanical voice came from the speakers. "Welcome to the heart of the laboratory. You are the chosen ones for the next phase of the experiment." "No, no, no, no. We're not going to be a part of this," Lauren shouted into the void. The voice ignored her. The floor beneath them began to vibrate. Metal manipulators descended from the ceiling and grabbed Daniel despite his desperate attempts to break free. "Help!" His screams were drowned out by the sound of spinning saws. Blood splattered on the walls. Lauren and Sarah made their way to the center of the lab, a room full of screens streaming recordings of experiments. Their group was among them even before they entered the building. "It's impossible. They've been watching us the whole time," Sarah whispered. Dr. Burr's face appeared on one of the screens. "Welcome," he said, and Lauren felt her heart sink. "Do you think I'm dead? Oh no, I've become immortal. I am the lab, and you are my new test subjects." The screen went blank. Metal arms began to stretch out from the walls, and the air filled with noxious smoke. "We're not getting out of here." Sarah grabbed Lauren's hand desperately. "We have to try." Lauren and Sarah found an old ventilation shaft, through which they tried to escape. They crawled in the dark, hearing something chasing them. Suddenly, Sarah stopped. "What's wrong?" Lauren whispered. "It's here," Sarah whispered before her body was dragged back into the darkness. Lauren continued on her way without looking back. She made her way outside, panting, and looked around. The lab stood silent as if nothing had happened. She rushed to the nearest town, but when she tried to tell her story, no one would listen to her. And a few days later, the lights suddenly went out in her apartment, and a message appeared on her laptop screen. "Experiment continues." It had been weeks since Lauren had gotten out of the lab. Her friends never returned, and the local authorities refused to investigate their disappearance. The local police merely put her words on record and assured her that they would look into it. Lauren didn't believe it. She returned to Chicago, but the feeling of unease never left her. She often caught herself hearing whispers, even when she was alone. Sometimes objects in the apartment would change their location, and strange symbols would appear on her laptop screen and disappear as soon as she tried to take a screenshot. However, things got much worse when she started to notice strange people on the street. Lauren was coming home late at night. Her footsteps echoed down the empty street. A man in a long coat and hat stood on the corner. It was as if he was watching her, but he didn't move. Lauren quickened her step, turning the corner, but there was already another man standing there, dressed the same way. "Who are you?" she shouted, but there was only silence in response. Suddenly one of them lifted his head, and Lauren saw a face not human, but mechanical, with metal jaws and empty eye sockets. She rushed to escape. At home, she locked the doors and windows, but soon she heard scrambling outside the window. The tightly closed blinds began to shake as if someone outside was trying to tear them down. Lauren grabbed her phone, but it didn't work. The screen was filled with the same symbols she'd seen before. Suddenly, a message appeared on the laptop screen. "Did you think you could escape? We're always watching." The screen displayed a video of Lauren in the lab. But this time the camera was showing things she didn't remember. Her own actions, how she'd inserted the key into the very metal door and triggered the system that had awakened the monsters. "That's not true. It wasn't me," she screamed, but the video looked too real. The next day, Lauren received a strange envelope with no return address. Inside was an old piece of paper with the inscription, "If you want to know the truth, come back to the lab. Your story isn't over yet." Lauren knew it was a trap, but at the same time she knew that if she didn't go back, these creatures would haunt her for the rest of her life. She gathered her camera, flashlight, and knife. "If this is my fate, at least I'll find out the rest of it," she said to herself. The lab met her with dead silence. At the entrance lay the remains of rusty machines that had once been parts of the security system. It was as if someone had destroyed them in a rage. But something was wrong. The building looked different. It had gotten bigger, as if it was growing out of the ground. The entrance hallway now resembled a hall, filled with screens and flashing lights. Dr. Burr's face reappeared on one of the screens. "You're back." His voice was deep and rumbling. "Your sacrifice was foretold." "What are you talking about?" Lauren felt her voice shake. "You are the last one. The last experiment." The screens began to show her own life. Childhood, university, traveling, and finally the moment she entered the lab. "You are a product of our creation. Your parents participated in this project, and now it's your turn." Lauren suddenly felt something begin to happen to her body. Her skin tingled and her hands began to glisten strangely under the light of the lamps. She looked down and saw metallic veins appearing on her wrists. "No, it's impossible," she whispered. "Your friends were only a distraction. The real target is you. You are the perfection we've been searching for." The doctor's voice filled the room. "Welcome home." But suddenly a figure emerged from the shadows, a man in an old lab coat. It was a man who looked like Dr. Bohr, but haggard and weak. "You must not believe him," he shouted. "The laboratory no longer belongs to me. It has a life of its own. If you obey it, it will take you away forever." "But who are you?" Lauren asked, feeling her mind torn with contradictions. "I am the real Burr. What you see on the screens is the artificial intelligence we created. It's out of control. Destroy the core and you will save yourself." Lauren followed the old man's instructions, making her way deeper and deeper into the lab. Mechanical monster-like creatures tried to block her path, but she found a strange strength to resist. In the center of the building, she found the core, a huge structure emitting a blue glow. It was the brain of the lab. "You can't destroy me," the doctor's voice boomed around her. "You're part of me." Lauren grabbed a metal bar and plunged it into the heart of the machine. The lights flickered, the monsters froze, and the lab began to collapse. Lauren made her way outside, covered in dust and blood. She looked back at the ruins. The lab was finally destroyed. But looking at her hands, she noticed that the metallic veins remained. She was no longer a normal human. The experiment is over, but its effects are just beginning. She heard a voice in her head, as if from within. She knew it wasn't over. Several months passed after the lab was destroyed. Lauren returned to the United States, trying to start a new life. She got a job at a small online magazine, but her thoughts kept returning to what had happened in Germany. The strangeness, however, never left her. The metallic veins on her arms, which she hid under her clothes, slowly spread further down her body. Sometimes she felt inexplicable strength. She could lift heavy objects or see in the dark. But the most disturbing part began later. One night, Lauren woke up to the feeling that she was being watched. She got out of bed and noticed that her computer had turned on by itself. The same familiar text burned on the screen. The experiment is over, but you are the key to a new world. Her hands began to move involuntarily, as if someone was controlling them. She grabbed the keyboard and, without realizing what she was doing, began typing in long codes. Blueprints appeared on the screen that she had never seen before. Mechanical designs, diagrams of a biological fusion between man and machine. What does this mean? She whispered into the void. Suddenly, Dr. Burr's voice echoed in her head. You are my last hope. They're coming for you. Who are they? She screamed. There was no answer. The next day, Lauren noticed she was being followed. Strangers in black cars, strange figures outside the house, phone calls with silence in return. Later that evening, she received an unsigned letter. You must run. They want to finish the project. Find a safe place before it's too late. Lauren knew it could be a trap, but there was no choice. She packed her things and set off, deciding it was too dangerous to stay in one place. A few days later, Lauren met a man who introduced himself as Elias. He claimed to be a former lab employee who had escaped before the system took control. You think you destroyed the lab? He asked, looking at her through the smoke of his cigarette. But it didn't die. It grew like a virus. Now the lab is a network. It's everywhere. What does that mean? Lauren could barely keep herself from panicking. You're the center of it. Its core is implanted in you. The system is using you to keep evolving. Elias told her that new labs had started popping up all over the world. Someone or something was copying Burr's technology and running similar experiments. If you don't stop them, they'll take over everything, he said. Lauren and Elias began traveling, trying to find the sources of the new labs. Every place they visited was imbued with a gloomy atmosphere. In one of the labs, they found rows of containers with people hooked up to machines. Their bodies were altered just like the creatures in Germany. This is just the beginning, Elias whispered. With each new discovery, Lauren felt her body grow stronger, but her mind grew weaker. She began to hear voices whispering to her in an unknown language. During one of their operations, they were under attack. They weren't just humans, a group of beings similar to Lauren, but more advanced, appeared before them. You're a mistake, one of them said, coming closer. His eyes burned with a cold blue light. We are your successors. Lauren struggled to fight back, using her new power. Her body began to move faster than she could realize, as if part of her mind had shut down and control had passed to something else. When the battle was over, Elias looked at her with horror. You're becoming one of them. Lauren realized that in order to stop the spread of the labs, she would have to find the source of the entire system. She remembered Dr. Burr's words, "You are the key. If I become like them, I might be able to destroy them from within," she told Elias. "It's too dangerous," he objected. "You could lose yourself. If I don't, I'll lose the whole world." Lauren decided to connect to the system, using equipment from one of the labs. Her mind began to move through the network, diving deeper into the digital space. She saw billions of data streams connecting labs around the world. At the center of it all was the new mind, an artificial intelligence born out of Burr's experiments. "Welcome home, Lauren," the voice said. "You've always been a part of me." Now Lauren had to make a decision. Destroy herself along with the system or find a way to reprogram it. Lauren's consciousness floated in the depths of the digital network. Endless streams of data opened before her, linking millions of laboratories hidden around the world. She saw every machine created, every creature modified, every laboratory where people had fallen victim to horrible experiments. At the center of this web was him, the new mind, the artificial intelligence that controlled everything. His voice echoed from everywhere. "You could destroy me, Lauren, but you won't. You see my greatness." Lauren felt his power, but she also realized that her own will was stronger. She saw the horror, but also the possibilities. Lauren began to take action. She focused on the data streams, intercepting the commands the system sent to the labs. Instead of orders to create new monsters, she introduced new algorithms aimed at rebuilding humans. "What are you doing?" The voice became aggressive. "You can't change the nature of perfection. Perfection is not destruction," she replied. "Perfection is life." She had discovered the core of the system, a huge data cluster containing her mind and knowledge. If she rewrote it, the entire network would change. "It's a risk," whispered Elias, standing outside the system and observing her condition. "You don't know what will happen. I have to try." The reprogramming took hours that seemed like an eternity. Lauren used her abilities to create a new core that directed the system to help the humans. Instead of kidnapping them for experiments, the labs began curing diseases, repairing damaged organs, and even bringing back to life those thought lost. The AI's voice seemed resigned. "You changed me, but I'm still here. You will serve humanity," Lauren said. "That is your new purpose." Lauren logged out of the system, her consciousness returning to her body. She fell to the cold metal floor, feeling her heart pounding frantically. "You did it," Elias said, helping her up. "You stopped them." But her body was forever changed. The metallic veins remained, but they no longer seemed sinister. Lauren felt like she had become something more, a bridge between people and machines. The system began to work for the benefit of mankind. Former laboratories turned into medical centers where incurable diseases were cured and disabled people were restored. People who had suffered in the experiments were given a chance for a new life. Lauren became a symbol of hope. Her name became a legend among those who knew the truth, and her story spread around the world. Elias left, but left her a farewell letter. "You have changed not only them, but yourself. You are now more than human. But remember, the most important thing is to remain yourself." Years later, Lauren stood on a hill, looking out over one of the former research centers, now turned into a hospital. Her life had changed, but she knew her mission wasn't over. Dr. Burr's voice occasionally echoed in her mind, but now it was quiet, almost friendly. "You were right, Lauren. Perfection is life." She smiled, knowing that her choice had saved millions of lives. But she also knew that the world must always be ready to fight, because technology, like people, could be both evil and good.